YouTube, welcome back. It seems like things might be heating up just a little bit in the roster mania offseason Call of Duty League discussion. So, as Clayster says in this tweet right here, it seems like the dominoes are starting to fall at least a little bit. On top of this tweet, which everybody is kind of going crazy about as of late, CDL Intel tweeted this. They said, expect every team not named Dallas Empire to have at least one new face on the starting lineup next season. And then underneath, they did also say, correction, we're not quite sure about the New York subliners either. So other than New York, it's expected that basically Atlanta and Chicago and London and Paris and OGLA and Seattle and everybody might have a new face on their squad. So as of late, the discussions have been going a little bit crazy. So let's go ahead and let's get right into it. Now, as we go ahead right here and we take a peek at Chicago's roster, there's a couple things that clearly are not happening, right? And whether it's the best thing for the Chicago's roster and teams of success, that can easily be debatable because we know Hector is super loyal. Obviously, he's not going to get rid of T2P, right? If the only thing that you were thinking about was success, then ARCITYS you have to keep, and Envoy you have to keep, right? Probably their two best players. I think everybody would agree with that. ARCITYS is probably their best in-game leader. Envoy's their MVP candidate, their young gun. So those two are probably the two that give them the best chance at success moving forward. But we know, as we know, just not even from Chicago this year, but from the Optic Gaming rosters in the past, that's not really quite how Hector runs his organization. He's super loyal. So I believe is going to happen, the new face that's going to end up being on Chicago, I think that there's no way they get rid of Formal and Scump. Now that T2P is reunited, they're two of the pros that have the biggest followings in the entire scene. So that obviously means a lot in terms of content and just the viewership that they bring. And they're nasty, right? I mean, they're still playing super great. So I think they're a lock. And I think Hector recognizes that Envoy is the future of his franchise. So I think that these three are automatically shoot in, which means if that tweet from CDL Intel is true, then obviously ARCITYS has to be the one to go. So I do think that ARCITYS and Pristini will be the ones to go, which, where do they find a home? Perhaps those two join up with Octane in Seattle, and now all of a sudden you find another dominant SMG, and now Seattle's immediately back on the map. Now, in order to find homes for all of these players, if Atlanta is going to have somebody new on their roster, I think it's pretty easy to tell who that might be. So obviously, they're not getting rid of Simp, right? He's probably the future Scump. We'll see what happens with his overall mentality and if he can draw people into his content, right? Scump just has an aura about him that Simp really hasn't shown yet, but there's no doubt about it. He's one of the brightest stars in our league. After that, the best and the fastest SMG probably throughout the entire league would be a BZ, so he's not going anywhere. And the third one, the man that can do it all, he can run an SMG, he can run an AR, he's super smart, hits all his shots, no moment is too big for him. You have Celium, which means that Major Maniac and Priesta would be the two that end up getting dropped. But I think, at least in my mind, it's pretty safe to say that Atlanta's going to go into next year with Simp, with a BZ and Celium, and a new fourth. So in order for these dominoes to start falling, let's think about who could possibly be their fourth. So in order to think about that, let's go ahead, let's take Priesta, let's take Major Maniac out of the equation. And if you look at three players, what's the one thing that they're missing? In my mind, they need, and this should be ringing a bell here, they need a main AR, they need that veteran presence, they need experience, they need that in-game leader, they need that hype man. As I've said, all five of those characteristics, there should be something ringing in the back of your head. I don't know if this is how it's going to work out, but who better to join these three players than Clayster? It's just, for me, it makes perfect sense. They would get that dominant AR. They'd get the in-game leader. They'd get, you know, when a BZ goes on his crazy sprees and gets 3 down right off the rip in search and destroy, you'd have that hype man in Clay. Sure, there's a bunch of other people they could pick up. Maybe it could be ARCITYS, maybe it could be Octane, but that hasn't been rumored at all. So for me, if there's going to be a new face on Atlanta FaZe, I feel like it's going to be Clayster. Which, if that's the case, let's go back and let's look at the Chicago scenario and see who might be most probable to join that roster. So as we talk about these 3, let's kind of think about something that they're missing. They have the main dominant AR. They have the SMG Slayer. They have Scump, who kind of can be a route man type deal. He's really not. Sometimes Envoy ends up doing that, but Scump is still a really good SMG. So they're really missing like some sort of flex player, which is why if you're talking about Clayster, it doesn't really fit in here, right? They need that Celium type player, and that's not really who Clayster is, so we can take him out. Now, when it comes to some of the rumors, there's a couple that have been getting a ton of traction as of late. The first one, just because of the familiarity with the organization and because they have such a history. And I'm not sure if this entirely works, but the first one that's rumored has been Dashie. So when it comes to Dashie, he's not really that true prototypical flex, kind of like what ARCITYS does. I know ARCITYS is really a main AR, but he doesn't really fill all those different roles that a Celium does fill. But I do think it's not a terrible fit, right? It's not like it would be the end of the world. Sure, there might be a little bit overlap because Dashie and Scump at times kind of do the same thing. Dashie's obviously best with an AR in his hand. So if it was a 2 AR meta when it comes to Black Ops Cold War, that would probably work out pretty well. But there's one other person that we just talked about recently throughout this that I think would honestly fit this roster perfectly. I think it would be nasty if somehow they were able to have Priesta join them. So, and again, this is all just me thinking, right? It's all just hypothetical, but Priesta added to this squad, I think it just checks all the boxes, right? He plays fast. He can play an SMG. He can play an AR. We've seen when the meta changed in the second half of Modern Warfare, we saw his stats completely be flipped on their head. He was playing super well. He was back in that AR position, but he was playing a fast AR. So I don't think it's going to be Clay here. Dashie has been rumored, but if Priesta ends up going over, I think that would be a tremendous fit. In the end, I think it's probably pretty clear that Pristini and ARCITYS are probably going somewhere else. I'm not sure if that's the best thing that can happen to the Huntsmen in terms of success. I think ARCITYS is irreplaceable. If I'm building that for success, I keep ARCITYS, I keep Envoy, and then I build from there. But I just don't think that ARCITYS is going to be split up from Pristini again. So maybe they go back out towards Seattle, team up with Octane. You get a 4th SMG on that squad and they would be dominant. But this is another one of those videos. Put it down below. I really want to hear your comments on this one. What do you think's going to be happening here? Do you think that Priesta and Major Maniac get dropped? Is it possible that Clay goes there? That would just be a tremendous spot for Clay to be. He would bring that mentality. He would bring that intelligence, in-game leader. That would just be a tremendous spot for him. Maybe Priesta comes over to Chicago. Maybe that's where Dashie ends up. What happens with Gunless? Does he get back into the league? I mean, there's just so many questions. Put them down below in the comments. Let me know what you guys are thinking. Thank you guys so much for all the support on my videos the last few days. It has been absolutely crazy, and I'm just so appreciative. It really does drive me to make more videos like this. So thank you guys for that. Leave a like. Helps out the channel. We will see you in tomorrow's upload.